Okay, so Aquarius, it's really awesome that we get to talk about Aquarius, given the fact that Pluto's in Aquarius, if you know anything about that, or if you do follow the astrology. Aquarius, I like to say I know, therefore I am, and I use that as an analogy because Aquarians do know. Sometimes they know too much, and it's a blessing and a curse. I think the blessing of it is to understand that you see so far and so you look to fix things. The curse is at what cost? How far are you going to go to try and fix society? And are you willing to actually be reasonable and work with the people around you? Otherwise, you run into isolating yourself and running yourself into being like a maverick or someone that just can't be worked with, right? You can get pretty extreme about it, and there's an urge to do so. But getting into this, let's actually talk about um, the actual planet. So I like to look at Aquarius and attribute it with Saturn and Uranus for the planets. It is traditionally just Uranus, but I do like to put Saturn in there because they kind of co-join in a way. And Aquarius is the water bearer. So if you're born between January 20th and February 18th, you are an Aquarian. It is the element of air, and this is definitely something that throws people off because they're like, why aquarium, Poseidon? I don't know why people get that, but they'll think of water. And I look at it and I think to myself that Aquarius is it's the human of the water signs because it's in a way emotionally reasonable at times, but it's very human where it could just do its own thing. And we'll get more into that. But the water bearer reminds me of the star card in tarot. And while I'm not the tarot expert, we do have one. Um, I do like to look at that card and say, in the star card in tarot, let's see if I can pull this up. You kind of see a woman pouring into what seems like a stream, a river, and also at the same time pouring onto the land. And I'm actually going to pull this up. This is going to be someone else's website, but you'll be able to see it. And this is something that I find to be interesting, which is why I give this to Aquarius. I'm not sure if this is the native. Um, but it's Aquarian because it's looking to be planting seeds in the future. If you look at the leaves and or the plants that are going there, while still staying in the current society and still watering itself at the same time. And it sees a bigger picture than what people around it might see. That's how I like to interpret this card. But the only way to actually find true balance is to live in both worlds. If you lean towards just planting the seeds, you might end up kind of like Johnny Appleseed and look too far in the future and never get to see what you actually reap, what you sow. And that is a danger, right? Let's take a look at this in more depth. So, positives is like what I was saying. It's very independent, it's very intellectual, but it has a vision. It sees things, and that's Uranus. Uranus is the birth giver of um, its children from Gaia, and it wants to come in and say, new idea, new idea, new idea. And it looks for problems to create solutions. And I really want to put that as a key term because that's really imperative. It looks for problems to create solutions. And sometimes that's not necessarily the best thing. Because if you look hard for a problem, you're going to find it, right? Sometimes there isn't actually a problem to be fixed, but rather a life to be enjoyed and consistency to be admired. Aquarius is the opposite of Leo. They're polar opposites. And to enjoy what's in front of you, to be very present in the moment and to be happy is very Leo. It's very fifth house. Aquarius is 11th house, and it's very much about people. It doesn't want to be too present in the moment. It wants to look at the future. But it is very caring and altruistic because it wants issues to be fixed. Steve Jobs, if I remember correctly, has a quote that says, if you want to get somewhere quick, you go alone. If you want to get somewhere far, you go together. And that go together, it's not just going for the group and assuming that's how they want to go together. It's going together. It's actively choosing to do that with other people and making sure they're accounted for as well. And I bring that up because Aquarians value their freedom and they like to encourage people to follow. Aquarius is the middle child, Leo is the older child, Leo's the younger child, and Capricorn's the older child of these three brothers in the zodiac that I like to term them, even though Aquarius really isn't like it's a human and the other ones are planets. But and the reason for that is because it doesn't know which one to pick. Do I go for the route of dictatorship and saying this is the way that we have to go to, leaning more towards Saturn? Or do I become the sun and try to be the beacon of light and hope and warmth? It's stuck in the middle. So this leads to something where I can say it can be a little rebellious because it oscillates from one extreme to another. And it will love to change something so much so that it'll constantly want to tell people that if you go left, I'm going to go right because you're going left and I might see right the right way. That's not necessarily always the case. It can very much be a disruptive behavior because Uranus will do that and it will bring like an immediate change to their life. It'll definitely look to the outer planets guide you to where you need to go, but the way they do it might not be friendly. And when it comes to Uranus, I really feel like Uranus is like the time is ticking. Like let's just do this now. It's like all in, right? Can be a little bit stubborn for this reason because Aquarius is a fixed sign. And when they get locked into the future, they tunnel vision into it and they don't want to communicate. And that's why I'm saying you can go somewhere quickly, but to get somewhere far, you do it together. You really want to do it with people. That way, you don't come across as emotionally distant or detached because you're so focused on the work and you only want to have intellectually stimulating interactions with people. When the whole point of community is just to be there with the community, it's to talk. It doesn't always have to be something deep, it can just be surface level. So, talking a little bit more about Uranus in itself, it obviously rules Aquarius, but it is a planet of sudden change and of innovation and the rebellion. But it's also revolutions. And that's a very important factor to keep in mind with Pluto being here. You will get technological advancements. So that's why, depending on the sign that Uranus is in, we will get change. Uranus has been in Taurus for the past few years, since like 2017. If I pull this up, you guys are able to see the chart, correct? I believe you are. Yeah, you should be able to. Uranus has been in Taurus, right? And Uranus in Taurus is taking destabilization, radical change, evolution, and putting it into Taurus, which has Venus properties. And that's all about wanting to actually have stability and comfort. It's ironic. Uranus and Taurus is actually, if I remember correctly, the detriment of Uranus because it's like all you want to do is stay stable. All I want to do is cause change. And so this placement is going to cause disruption in the signs of Venus. And if Venus is about values, love, self fulfillment, right? With a little bit of happiness, your own money, Uranus and Taurus is going to disrupt finances. And I look at that and I see Uranus, the technology and evolution. Uranus and Taurus kind of really shocked crypto enough to become where it is now, right? If you go back and you look at the charts around that time, it's also kind of changed the ability for us to have GMOs at a better rate than anything before. Uranus and Taurus also in its like much more stronger transitory forms, we've seen rises of farmers and the seeds that they've been having to have issues with companies that are patenting them. Recently, within the last 2 years, where there are heavy transits to Uranus with Pluto also trining, we saw rebellions from farmers around the world. And it's really about what it is that has been stable that we've taken for granted. And it's like, this isn't going to stay this way. So with Uranus now leaving Taurus, going into Gemini, and this year, you're going to see communication get changed. It's going to have a shock. It's going to be something very quick. It might feel like time is speeding up because we're going to get more disruption in it, but that will bring better efficiency over time. And that's where Uranus is that sudden change. It does lead to evolution and innovation, but it just isn't such a subtle change in. I'd really advocate that you guys take a look at what planet you have Uranus in and keep that in mind for your chart for future transits around that time. I think Uranus and Pluto both have pretty strong ones. Saturn's actually a friend when it comes to some of the transits. You just have to buckle down and do what you need to do. Um, we do see freedom, but we do see that, ironically, Uranus rules astrology because it's different. The idea of an Aquarian personality is someone that's going to do a different task, a different hobby, a different job, and that leads to them wanting to express or experience life in a way that no one else is going to do. Astrology is an Aquarian field. I have Uranus, as one of my mentors have said, I'm an honorary honorary Aquarian because of some of my aspects to it. And I've been able to look back in my life prior to knowing astrology and be like, oh, this was this. Like I could see that with the way Uranus has been affecting my life. It affects a lot of my life. And while things happen, it's taught me the ability to detach healthily. And I never could fully understand that until I started getting into astrology and realize looking for a pattern and looking for a way to see something that other people don't is the cornerstone of Aquarius. And for that same reason, I will say that Uranus or Aquarius is, in my opinion, an upgrade. I won't say exaltation, but it is a direct upgrade from mercurial placements, which would be Gemini and Virgo. Because it takes the pattern recognition of Virgo and it takes the ability to process a lot of different things and it looks for the future and it's looking 80 plus years into the future versus this is in the present now. And so astrology is in that way. It's always looking at the future. It's really cool. But the future, in order to be rebuilt, is going to require that you can be a different person now. It's going to require that you're spending a lot of time doing the thing that you're interested in now. But the biggest thing for Aquarians is to be able to integrate with the rest of society. Uranus takes 84 years to complete an orbit around the sun. It spends 7 years in each zodiac sign. It's slow, but it's going to cause shifts. I like to say Neptune causes the way we consume media, fashion trends. Uranus causes technological changes. It causes economical disruptions, but it's also social acceptability for things. Pluto and Saturn have their own cycles, but these two, Neptune and Uranus, you really want to see how they interact. In society, if you go back in time, if a sudden event happens and it's a Uranus transit, not factoring in Pluto, how is it digested or put out into the society, into the collective with Neptune, right? It's a way to look at the authenticity of the immediate action and the way it's digested with Neptune. That's a little astrology trick that I've kind of seen in some people's house and charts. But let's take a look at the houses. Before I continue, I just want to make sure that none of you have questions for me. If you do, you can put it in the chat. You can raise your hand. Just wanted to make sure I was pacing myself and you guys aren't a little bit lost. But looking at where Aquarius is in your house is where I would give you an excuse to think differently. Oh my gosh, that's hopefully they don't sue me, but to quite literally think in a different way. Let's say that instead. You don't want to just look at life in the black and white. You want it to be colorful. You want it to be an expression. And so if you have Aquarius in your actual 11th house and it's in its natural position, which is about community and people, then you're going to want to see how Aquarius in the 11th house is going to play a part in your interactions with those people. If you have Aquarius in your 8th house, now the shading of the 8th house is implemented onto that sign being an Aquarius, meaning all things Scorpio. So we'd be putting the taboo interests, the things that no one wants to talk about, the interesting cliches, the underworld-like things, intimacy of other, and then shade it in Aquarius. But then the planets you have, let's say you have Venus, you're going to have the values of that, and it just layers and layers and layers. I like to look at it and say wherever you have Aquarius is where you can give yourself the excuse to be weird. And the house that you have Aquarius or Uranus, the planet, is where you really want to embrace constant change. The Aquarius planets that might be the most difficult would definitely be Moon or Venus because your sense of values and your emotions. Aquarius moons, you really got to let them live. You really got to let them be free. They're their own human being, and that could be hard for people because they can detach. They can come back and be fully present, and they can detach. The Venuses like difference, and it's going to be difference of culture. It might be difference of gender. It might be same gender. It might be an interest outside of themselves. It cannot be the same as they are. And I look at that and I think to myself, when you look at astrology, many ways to digest the connections of one sign. Leo being the one that wants to be seen, that wants to be known, that wants to be understood. The direct polarity, or the plus or minus, the way that we digest this world, good or bad, or good and evil, whatever, the polarity of Aquarius is to be seen and understood. And that immediate polarity is what you're getting here with Leo. Now, if we remove the polarity aspect and we think similarities or drive, ambition, think of Sagittarius or Aries. They're fire, all of them. And I like this like cross-like thing because it's shown me, okay, Aquarians are driven. That's where they can be stubborn. It's not necessarily a fixed property, but they want to win. They want to win in their respective ways of helping. They are also willing to go and be the maverick and do the thing that other people will be too afraid to do. And then if I were to put Venus in here, I could say, well, an Aquarius Venus might love bomb you because it's like having Aries Venus properties. But then at the same time, they are probably going to like a culture or something different than theirs. That's a Sag Venus. And then at the same time, they're going to take that and make an obsession out of it and try to make it their own way with a Venus and Leo. Take that as you will, but it's just something to keep in mind. And when we talk more about the 11th house, you can start to see this play out. Your Uranus is in Aquarius in the third house. Okay, communication. That's a big one. Pluto is going to be in your third. Really, really, really learning to actually express how you feel about things. If I remember correctly, Uranus in the third. What is that, a Sag rising? I think so. That'd be Capricorn second house. And then, yeah, Sag rising. So that means you have Leo in the ninth, or sorry, Sagittarius whole sign. If you have late degrees of Scorpio, it could be that too. But you have Leo in your ninth house. Yeah, it's really important that you allow yourself to be free moving forward with Pluto in that third house. or at least speak your mind. This that archetype is very much like I'm keeping composure for what people need to see me as, but then I want to be something completely different. Um, I actually don't want to just be the face of what is expected for the lineage. I actually want to let the nerdiness out. But long-term goals and aspirations. The 11th house can be seen as where you kind of achieve. And a little nice trick, if you've been here for my 10th house lesson, the midheaven in a chart is not necessarily always in the 10th house. Sometimes it could be in a different house. And I notice when I do readings with clients, the midheaven in the 11th house is so much easier for people, ironically, than the midheaven in the 10th house. And I've come to the conclusion it's just because it like siphons some of that 11th house ability that if you work with people, you're going to go farther than working by yourself, which is the 10th house, right? To actually show yourself. You will like to integrate people. So the planets you have in the 11th, it's almost like a gift. It's almost like, hey, this isn't that bad. Maybe if you have Scorpio in the 11th house, it might be a different story, but it typically is easier. The 10th and 11th house, in my opinion, share the same kind of like blend because it's like, yeah, you could be an amazing CEO of something, but what does that mean if you don't have a community of people to like integrate with, which is like the 11th, since each house builds upon itself. You use the ninth house to get the education, the higher education, and the experience to apply it in your actual career. And you can't apply it to your career if you don't have support systems and allies. People are leverage, and it's not to use people maliciously, but if just the few of us here, if we each were to save $10 a day, we each have $50 at the end of one, like Monday through Friday, then we'd have more than $300 together collectively, right? That's leverage and it's just. And your community, your support network is leverage. Having air signs in your 11th house makes you the point of contact a lot of the times. But more importantly, where you have Aquarius is where you want to offer yourself to have leverage by connecting with people. The 11th house itself will show you how you can express that, right? Given the fact that 11 and 5 in the zodiac are casual everything. The fifth house is more intimate, casual relationships, and the 11th house is more non romantic, casual friendships, right? Versus the second and eighth will be like more intimate between for yourself and for other people. You also have humanitarian efforts through social events, social movements, and it's typically seen as the house of good spirit. And even in Jyotish or Vedic, that I've been spending a lot of time with, 11th house is like one of the luckiest house. Like ninth is really good, but 11th house is like you just win because people do it for you, and it's like wow, you get to enjoy that. And I started looking a lot more at the 11th house because of this reason in charts um, early last year. But let's talk about the planetary dignities because I like to get straight to the point. I try to keep it simple. But this is a little bit more intricate. But the domicile is where the sign best fits the planet. The detriment is where the sign doesn't necessarily want to be because it has to work with itself. It's conflicted. For instance, Moon in Scorpio is Moon does not want to be in Scorpio because it's obsessive. It's so compulsory. And I have some clients that have that, and you know, I watch them time and time again get looped back into a cycle of destruction about something. But then I teach them the opposite of that is a Moon in Taurus. They're unbothered. Have you met a Moon in Taurus? They are unbothered. Like, give them a home, give them food, give them comfort and a pet, and you will not see them unless they absolutely need it. And then they will make a family and be forever like not caring about what's going on because they are Venusian. Mars is the ruler of Scorpio, so in the moon, it always feels like it has to do something with that emotion. It can't just sit with it. that could be seen as a detriment. In some charts, it's not. It's actually probably an amazing thing to have because it depends on the person. The exaltation is the best place that it can be because it's like, I get to fully express myself, whether crazy or not, depending on the sign and the planet. And the fall is where it's not even just least effective, but it's like it's almost unable to be controlled. I like to say that the detriment is like feeding in on itself, and the fall is like unable to stop eating outside of itself. Um, but let's take a look. Oh, the picture didn't load. That is tragic. So Uranus has its domicile in Aquarius, and we know that. And I'll actually draw this out as we're doing this, since it seems that the tech is not my friend. But Uranus wants to be it wants to be, oh, that is ugly. We can do better than that. Uranus wants to be in Aquarius. That is definitely its domicile, right? It gets to be innovative, independent, and completely unconventional. That's why when I read these and I talk about the sign and the planet, it's almost like I'm saying the same thing over again because that's where it wants to be. But I'm telling you the properties of the sign because what if you have Aquarius and Mars, right? You're a true maverick. That's a very strong position to have. Good luck. But that's different than Uranus and Scorpio, right? You want to know both. They do have similar properties, but expresses it just a little bit different. So that way you know how it diversifies and the variation. Now, the detriment here for Uranus is Leo. It's very simple to see why. If the domicile of Aquarius, sorry, of Uranus is Aquarius, it gets to be on its own, it gets to be different and integrate into a community where it's individual. Leo wants to be the center of attention. It wants to be the star. It wants to be the reason why everyone's getting together. And also, Aquarius is about sharing. Leo is not. Leo's like, what do I need? And then it can just trickle down. Well, that might be more Capricorn and Saturn, but it's more like, I'll share the toys after I'm done playing, right? So for that reason, it's not exactly where it wants to be. Little key note there. This is why we constantly go back to the baby boomer generation. That the Pluto, the people that had Neptune and Leo. I don't believe they were conjunct, but I know Uranus around that time with like Pluto, Scorpio. Like that is a strong placement to have. Made a lot of rock stars though. Made a lot of rock stars um, for that sole reason. So let's talk about the exaltation. It's actually Scorpio for the exaltation. And that's kind of like, at first, it threw me off when I first learned about this a few years ago. Um, and then I was like, wait, if Uranus wants to obsess about the future, what better sign to be in than literally Scorpio? And I find that whenever you have a Scorpio and Aquarius person, they might clash at first, but they will entertain each other's chaos and craziness because it's like having a Mars in Aquarius because Scorpio is ruled by Mars and Uranus is in itself an embodiment of Aquarius. And so it has this drive that it takes the Martian energy of Scorpio and then it combines it with this obsessive drive to make better changes and revolution. And that's why this is the exaltation. So obviously, if we have an exaltation, the polarity shows us the opposite would be the fall, and that is in Taurus. Now, as I said earlier, we've been Uranus and Taurus, so it's been kind of hard for us, but it has given us new ways of looking at food, healthy food reforms, better ways to implement GMOs, or at least the awareness of microplastics everywhere, revolutions with the seed um, industry and looking at the way farmers have been dealing with stuff. But also because Venus wants to be stable, it wants to be consistent. Uranus does not want to be there. It doesn't want to constantly have to change. And that makes you feel like every time something's getting good, it's like we got to just change it. But Taurus is about the slow and steady grind. all the earth signs are about having time to make something better up until we get to father time, Saturn, which is Capricorn. But with that being said, that's pretty much it for Aquarius. It's a sign that definitely gets its own um, roundup of applause for me because ultimately, no matter what happens, we have to thank an Aquarian for what we have today because they will go out of their way to make it happen. So, yeah, thank you so much.